Welcome to Imprint, a podcast about creating a home and life you love. I'm Natalie Walton, an interior designer, stylist, and best-selling author focused on an holistic approach to homes. Each week, I'm sharing insights and interviews about the creative process to help you enhance both your interiors and well-being, as well as provide you with the tools and resources to make considered and sustainable choices with all that you create. Hello everyone, welcome to Imprint. I'm very much looking forward to sharing my conversation today with Lauren Nelson. She is an interior designer based in the San Francisco Bay Area and works on a range of projects, mostly high-end residential, and really has beautiful work. And she shares her journey of building her business over the past 15 years, what it's looked like in the various stages, what has been the key to her growth in this business and kind of getting these types of projects to work on, and shares insights into her pricing, how she manages the processes, delegation, all of the things. So I really think you're going to enjoy this conversation as much as I did. And please go and check out her work. We'll share all the links in the show notes. And please enjoy my conversation with Lauren Nelson. Hi, Lauren. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast and really looking forward to learning more about you and your journey as an interior designer, because you've just got the most beautiful work. But I always like to start these conversations a little bit further back and learn more about your journey to how you became an interior designer, because I know it's something that so many people would love to have this type of career. But even going back a little bit further than that, when you were a child, where you grew up, and how you think maybe the homes that you grew up in or your upbringing influenced where you are today. Can you start there, please?
Sure. Well, I'm happy to be here. So I've been a big fan of your work for a while as well. Um, Going back to my childhood, so now I live in California, but I grew up on the East Coast. So I grew up in Maryland and spent most of my childhood there. I did not go to school for interior design, so it's something that I was not surrounded by designers. My parents weren't designers. My dad was an engineer. My mom was a teacher. So I think that not there wasn't a familiarity with that career path for me. So when I went to college, I was a big fan of the arts, the visual arts, but was not even aware that interior design was an option for me. It wasn't until after I finished undergrad that I then realized that that was my path. But I would say, being artistic was something that kind of came naturally to me. My mom made all of our Halloween costumes from scratch. She made our clothing. Every diorama and art project I had, she would help me with. So we were crafty in that way. And I think making things from our hands and drawing and sketching was something I always did. I'm a left hand person and I was always practicing with both left and right. And so I think I was just inclined to be that way. But I thought that being a visual artist meant either a painter or a graphic designer. I didn't realize I could apply it into a three-dimensional world like that. So when I finished undergrad, I had studied graphic design and communications. I went straight into public relations, which was branched off from communications, and was employed by Williams Sonoma Incorporated, which, as you know, has many retail brands: Pottery Barn, West Elm. And when I was there, I really enjoyed. I think I got twofold this sense of what it means to live in a comfortable home and cook nice meals and that, but I also understood the relationship that interior design has on a person. Meaning, we'd go for press, we would go and make over people's homes, and then it would be published in magazines. And I was working with design editors on projects, and I just thought I'd love to be the person designing that versus the person promoting it and publishing it. So that's the connection I got to design. So while I was working for Williams Sonoma, I was taking classes for design and architecture, and that's where it was dipping my toes in the water. And I I really liked what I was doing there, but it was hard to do full-time work and classes, so then I actually just went to go work for a designer full on. I said, "I'm just gonna have a career shift. I'm going to go apprentice for somebody." I did that, and I really just loved it, and from there, that was my path.
Okay, so let's pull that apart a little bit because I think, at each point, there's that point where you have to make a decision like, do I keep going for that? Which is, I know so many people struggle with making that decision that I've got the safety and the security of this particular job. And I'm sure there's perks and all of those things. And maybe when you then go an apprentice, it's maybe a pay cut, or maybe, there are different elements to that where you're having to, um, yeah, make a decision about, is this the next right move? Did you feel confident in that, or was there any concerns or worries that you had?
There it was not 100% confidence. I would be lying if I said that. There was definitely concern, just in the sense that I took a big pay cut. I wasn't even employed full time. I just had the benefit of youth, of optimism. I was young enough where I did not have a mortgage, I did not have mouths to feed. I just had myself to worry about, and I saved money from my corporate job, and I went to go work for just hourly, part-time, almost nothing, and then I was selling paintings on the side and thought, "Well, if I can make this work, let's see how it goes." So I had a full year of self-doubt and is this the right thing? And, I think it was not an easy path, I would say. It sounds really easy. Oh, I just quit my job and became a designer. I mean, I ate Trader Joe's for straight for I don't know if you're familiar, but I just ate very affordably and I wasn't splurgy. It wasn't really until, I would say probably 2 years into it that I thought, "This is really something I can do," and I'm actually quite fond of it, but also good at it. And I would say, I just kept following my gut that not every job will be the same. And each job gives me new lessons and each job gives me a new insight into what this will be. And I didn't want to turn around right away. I wanted to just keep going, even though I had moments of this isn't easy and this is hard and not all clients are respectful. And it was a good crash course.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I was curious to know, because I think that so often that part of the journey gets skipped over, that, people want to kind of pursue their passion, but yet there is this kind of fuzzy phase where you're not sure if it's going to work out, and also you're taking an element of risk, and yeah, you don't have that certainty, but you have to step into uncertainty, to kind of get where you want to go. So I do think it's important to kind of highlight that, because I do think it's such a huge part of the journey. And it's like that fork in the road almost, where you sort of decide, okay, am I going this way or that way? And what is that journey going to look like for me? So yeah,
Yes.
thank you for sharing that. And so you went and did worked for this other firm. And so what capacity were you working at those, like at the very start of that journey? Like were you just helping other designers? Can like you paint a picture of like what that looked like and then how that evolved, that role? And did you then go work for other companies, or at what point did you decide, okay, I'm going to start to take on clients myself?
Yeah. So the designer I worked for only had one other person working for her at the time, who was her right-hand assistant. And then she did some design, but it was more coordinating. So I came on as more like a, I guess, assistant designer, a very, very junior designer. I wasn't even junior. I was the lowest level you could be. But she really gave me a I wore lots of hats and she gave me a fair amount of responsibility. And she even had clients that she couldn't take on herself, but said, "Well, if on the days that you're not working for me, if you want to take this client, feel free." And so over the course of that year, I think she just gave me confidence that I could do it myself. And these were small jobs, mind you. This was not renovations. This was more just decorating, but it just gave me a little sense of, okay, I can do lots of different things for this designer. I understand the client relationship aspect. I can communicate well and professionally with clients. But it was a bit of a throwing me into it right away and figuring it out. And so I did that for a year before I had to relocate for personal reasons. I moved back to the East Coast to be with my now husband at the time because he was in school there. So I was my hand was forced to either decide to go work for a firm when I got there or just keep taking projects by myself. And I just really, the stars aligned, and I had some people that I knew that needed help with their homes. So it was a very short period of me working for another firm before I did try to go out on my own, but it wasn't in a big way. It was in a very underground way where, I didn't even have a website. I was really just taking projects to get experience and get some portfolio work, but it wasn't I didn't feel like I truly established my firm until later, where I hired an assistant and I became, legitimately like I knew I wanted my own firm. So if that helps paint the picture, it also came organically where enough people needed my help and trusted in me, and I made it work there.
Yeah. And again, I just think that so often this part of the journey gets glossed over. So it's really helpful for so many people I know who will be listening to kind of hear the kind of the very beginnings. And so, as you said, you didn't you started going and doing some design classes, but if am I correct that you didn't finish those? And so when you were taking on work, were you then learning any programs on the side, or how were you doing, or was it more the decorating, the textiles, that side of things where you didn't necessarily need to be knowing programs? Like how did you strike that balance
Yeah,
between, doing jobs where you didn't maybe have the technical skills but still kind of getting bigger and bigger projects?
right. Well, I learned what I felt like were the critical classes. So if I had finished my program, it would have been a 4-year program because it was for people like me that were switching careers. So after 2 years, I said, "I just don't think I can do this for 2 more years." So I learned AutoCAD, I learned, materials, I learned perspective drawing, I learned all the things that really just, were able to get me to that first step, and then from there, I just started with more decorating versus renovation. So, along the way, I learned much more just throughout the course of working with architects and working with contractors and realizing that I could hire somebody that was better at AutoCAD than I was. So, I learned it very early on, but I haven't touched it since then because I've been so fortunate to have drafts people that work for me. So I think that was a big lesson is, my strength in the beginning and what I mainly did was decorating. And then that evolved into renovation. And once I grew bigger and bigger, I hired people with the skills that I needed to execute that and to make that functional. So, and I remember listening to other designers that I really respected at the time saying the same thing. So that gave me confidence that okay, I don't have to be the best at everything. I can build a team and I can, just capitalize on everyone's strengths in that way.
And so, at what point, how far into your journey, like how many years was it before you had that first hire? And was that first hire somebody to do the technical drawings?
Yes.
And did you take them on full time, or was it more a sort of number of hours per week?
I want to say it was probably by year 3 that I hired a person and she did drawings and I'm pretty certain she was full time. It was a while back, so I'm trying to remember. I think it was full time, and she was lovely. She lived, nearby me, and I had a home office, and she would come to my home, and we'd just work together. So that was fairly early on, but it wasn't year 1. It was more like year 3.
Okay, and so let's talk about in those early days as well, pricing, how to price your services. Because again, I think this is something that so many people struggle with, and it's such a journey that people go on in terms of knowing how to charge for your work. So, for those very early projects, were you doing any work for free, just to kind of get a bit of a portfolio going, or were you always charging from the start? And how did you work out what to charge?
Great question. I worked for free a couple small things for friends and family. I would say Almost everyone I charged, but it was very little in the beginning. And it was, I mean, I think an eighth of what I charge now. It was not, it was just enough to feel like I was valuing myself, but cheap enough to feel like it was, you know, worth my time of inexperience. So I would say, I think I just asked, I'm not even sure. I don't know if I asked someone that felt like they were on my level. I did a little bit of competitive research and felt like, okay, if you're charging that, I feel like my experience is the same and we'll do the same. But I want to say it was $40 an hour in the beginning. And if you know designers' pricing, that's very, very low. But that was the start. And those were my very first projects. And then it just each year I felt like as I gained more experience and as I gained more, just more credibility in the design community, I kept increasing the price, and I was trying to get a feel for what is the competitive rate. What are designers charging that feel like they're on my level, not the ones that have been around for 10 years and 15 years.
And did you charge did you charge out to the client as an hourly rate to start off with, or at
Yes.
what point? And do you do flat rate now, or like at what point have you sort of transitioned and worked out the best pricing model for your business?
I started with flat rate for certain things that were just felt small enough. I quickly learned as I was growing that flat rate didn't work for me. I felt like there was just so many hours that were unaccounted for because of various reasons. But I think that flat rate for me just felt like it wasn't it wasn't tying to back to how many hours we would work. So we quickly realized hourly was the best. We only charged for the hours we worked and we did get paid for the hours we worked. So it felt the most clear and fair. And I think a lot of clients understood that and were familiar with that. I think a lot of designers do it that way. And I think that now that we're on such larger scale projects, we always give a ballpark of what we think the overall hours will be because that's a that's an abstract thing. If you give an hourly rate, it's hard for them to know,
Yeah.
well, how many hours will this take? We give ballparks, but then we do bill hourly each month so that they're aware of where we stand along the way.
And are you charging out different rates for different people on your team in terms of, this person, maybe a more administrative type person or junior, has worked this many hours and you're charging different rates for different people?
Yes, each one of us has our own rate, and that's based on experience. So we did shift to that. We've been doing that for a long time. So my rate would be the highest, and then the person that was most recently hired, our junior assistant, she's the least. So each person bills at a different rate.
And so, what does your team look like now? Can you sort of run us through who's on your team and what their sort of roles and responsibilities are?
Sure. We have a studio coordinator, and she manages our studio, all of our trade accounts, and the physical space, our sample library. She's a whiz at all things organization, so she keeps everything very tidy and beautiful. I would say that's a role that I've added recently. I did not always have that, and it feels so luxurious to have someone like that that can just keep everything on track administratively. The paperwork, the bills, all of the things that it takes to run an office. And then I have a design assistant, and she basically supports the design team and she does procurement. And then I have a designer who works directly with me on designing the projects. And then there's myself, principal and lead design. So it's a very collaborative process. I would say we're all four of us touch the project in some way or another. The most client facing roles are myself and the designer. But every Monday, we all meet as a team in the studio and we talk about what's ahead of us that week. And we look ahead even to the next week so that we can all prepare and we have our marching orders for what to do that day and that week. And it's really nice because it's a great touch base and it's a good way for everyone to understand, if there's updates that need to be made, we all talk about it as a team, and that's been working well for us.
And so is everyone based locally?
Yes.
Okay. And so I'm curious about, because like you say, you were based on the East Coast and now you're on the West Coast. So at what point did you move across, and how did you find that transition in terms of, so much of interior design is referrals and getting people in your local area to, refer you, and you get this network and community of people around you, even suppliers and, trades and all of those different things, and then moving across. How was that transition for you?
So, in terms of being familiar with sources and vendors and trades, I had always been I mean, I basically started the business on the West Coast, but moving from East to West, finding local tradespeople was difficult. I would say finding clients was it was very serendipitous, where the client that I was working for on the East Coast, um, she had a friend on the West Coast in California, in the city that I was moving to, that had just purchased a home in Presidio Heights, which is a beautiful neighborhood. And she said, would you be interested in just talking to her and seeing if she would want you to design her house? And that project really helped me get my footing, because it not only gave me work, but it really just helped me have something solid to work on for the next 2 years. And that gave me time to gather all the local tradespeople. And we were working with a reputable architect and a reputable contractor. So that immensely helped with just not having to find everybody myself. The electrician and the plumber and the carpenter, like all of that was built into the project. And so it did give me time for my smaller projects to just really vet out, like, who do we want to work with, and who is important to fill our Rolodex with.
And how long ago was that you moved across to the sort of San Francisco area?
Let's see. That was 2011. So that was 13 years ago. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you've been quite established there then for a number of years.
hmm
Um, and so how would you say that you get most clients? Is it through referrals, or I know you've had quite a lot of really good press. Is it through press? Where would you say is kind of most of your client base coming from?
It used to be 100% referrals. And now I would say it's much more, um, it's coming from different avenues. Some of it's referrals, but less so, because I have just a broader reach. So we get a lot of inquiries through social media. Instagram has been quite prolific with inquiries. I think a lot of people just are active on Instagram, and especially in the design industry, I feel like there's so much visual content out there. So we do get a lot from Instagram. I think also just through our local network, from the both clients, builders and contractors and architects that we work with.
And so, with those inquiries through Instagram, I mean, first of all, are you managing your Instagram accounts? And then, how are you filtering those clients? Because I'm sure you get all sorts of different people on different budgets and different scales of projects. So, do you have some kind of filter that you use to, you know, work through like which are going to be the ones that are worth my time spending on actually even speaking to these people?
Right. I do manage my own Instagram. I don't We try and point people to the website to we have a form on our website. So I would say a lot of leads might I should say the leads usually come when I talk once I speak to them, they say they found me on Instagram or they've been following me for years. But I don't actually the DMs that come in are very hard to manage, as you know. It's like hard for all the the non-followers to answer those. So I really try and point everyone to our website, and if they're serious, they email us with some key questions that we ask about. Where is the project? What is the scope? Desired budget, desired start time, things like that. And then once we look at that, we it really helps us filter out, okay, who should we, take the next step. We try and get back to everybody, but in terms of who are we going to pursue, um, we look at geographic location, we look at the scope, we look at if, if they're already working with an architect or a builder, that helps. So we do try and be selective just because there's only so many projects we can take each year. Our average project is about 2 years long, sometimes 3, sometimes a year and a half. At times, we've had projects that have taken 4 years, so I would say that really helps. If someone does successfully reach me on Instagram, I will gladly write back and just say, "Please email this email." And so we have someone on my team is the one that reads the initial emails, and then once they vet those, then they send the ones that feel promising to me.
Now, your projects are, incredibly beautiful and sophisticated and, look like they've got quite generous budgets. But, in that kind of, I guess, like if we go back 5 years where you're in that building process of your business to getting to that point, did you have things like, I guess, like a pricing guide? Would you have something along those lines to, for prospective clients? Did you ever do things like discovery calls? I'm just curious of like to help grow the business. Have you gone down the path of any of that, or has it been more of an organic growth?
I would say it's been more organic, and it's been pretty much it's been more so really trying to get somebody on the phone, not for an hour, because that's too hard to speak to all these people for an hour, but for a half an hour, if it feels like on paper it looks good enough, then I'll speak to them because I do believe strongly in just verbal communication and nonverbal communication and seeing how somebody responds to you and what the dialogue is. So I think that's important for me. And I don't charge for consultations. I don't charge for those intake calls, but I would never sign on to a project on paper that I hadn't spoken to first. So I would say over the years, we've just been, I've been able to at least have help and support with the initial intake, but I'm always the one to speak to them when it comes to the decision of, well, will we move forward with this project?
Okay, and so you have, like I said, you've got some really beautiful projects that you've been working on and getting really great press for that. So, would you say that those projects are, you know, a representative of most of the work that you're doing at the moment, or is it like they're the stellar ones and you're still working on some that are sort of maybe a little bit more modest, but they're sort of ticking along in the background, or what's the kind of the mix of the projects that you're working on?
I would say we used to have more of the some big ones and then several little ones that maybe not didn't get photographed, but there are plenty of projects we've done that are not photographed and on the website. But I think the further along I get in my career, the more I realize that even though the little ones are nice, and I still take some small projects just because it's nice to get through some quickly versus the 2, 3 year. The bigger ones just are more gratifying in terms of really being able to make a dent or just make a big difference in the home and really see it through from start to finish. So I think there's a balance. I like to have some smaller ones just to also fill in the gaps when sometimes there's a delay in the big ones. But the more the each year, I think I try and really be selective with the projects that are going to give us both the aesthetic feel that we want, but also the client relationship enjoyment. So it's really a balance of, is this person someone that we want to enter a relationship with for 2, 3 years? And are we aligned aesthetically? Is the house interesting? All of those things, if they all those boxes are checked, it's a wonderful, exciting moment where we launch a new project. If not all of those boxes are checked, but we need work, sure, we'll take smaller projects. But I do think there's something to be said about waiting even for the right ones that feel right. And that's something I've just learned over the years. Not
Yeah,
saying yes
no,
to everything.
Yeah. And let's talk about the clients. Like what is the kind of the mix of clients that you're getting? Are these people who are in completely unrelated fields to creativity? You know, maybe they're I don't know, uh, doctors or lawyers or tech people that they just want somebody to like they like your aesthetic but they just want to hand it off across to you, or what do you find that you tend to attract in terms of the types of clients that are coming to you?
It's quite a range. I think that there are some clients that are very interested and inspired and design savvy, and those clients can be really fun to work with because they have a strong point of view. I think the the other end of the spectrum would be the clients that say, "I really don't have a strong opinion. I really just trust your judgment." And that can be great too because there's more freedom in that. The tricky part is just is it, do they truly give you that freedom, or do they then come back with more opinions than they thought they had, which is completely acceptable and fine, but it's more, I would say there's the perfect client for us is somewhere in the middle where they are involved, they have opinions, they know what they like, but they give you enough freedom to really make it bigger than what they would have come up with, or more expansive or more playful or more, our job is to provide something that they can't do themselves. So I think that's when it's really fun when we can push boundaries a little, but keep them in their comfort zone enough to where they feel confident that we'll deliver something that they'll be happy with, but also trust that there is, that we can come up with some really interesting things if there was just some a long leash to do that with.
And do they typically tend to be in your geographical area? Are you sort of predominantly doing projects in the San Francisco area, or San Francisco Bay
Mostly,
Area, I should
I
say?
would say yes, mostly Northern California, and Bay Area is, yeah, pretty broad, but I would say wine country, which is an hour north of us, and then San Francisco proper, and then we also Lake Tahoe, we've gotten a couple projects there, and then over, I would say west, going an hour west is the beach. We have a beautiful coastline, and we've done some beach houses there. So I would say within an hour and a half, we our radius is, and then we do take projects abroad or international and domestic. We have a project in the Bahamas, which will be completed this year with any luck, and that's been fun to work on. But most of our projects we can drive to.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, do you feel that there was a tipping point at any point in your journey with the business that you kind of felt like I'm starting to get the clients that I really enjoying working with, the type of budgets that I, make it, feasible to sort of create this vision that I want to have for the business, that, the processes and the systems are all kind of kicking into place? And if so, like at what point did you feel that was? How many years into the business?
I would say probably 4 or 5 years into the business did I only then could I feel real confident that it was kicking into gear, but I was also I knew that I started my own path very early, or my own firm early, so I was not really keen to fast forward, so like, I didn't wanna grow so big so fast. I actually really wanted to take a slower avenue because I just didn't wanna feel like I was in over my head. So, I would say 5 years in is when I had some support, I was getting better projects, and I felt like, "Okay, this is, like, the next level." But then I would say 3 years ago, I felt like another bump where I hired a business consultant to come in and really look at our processes and look at our project management, and I added a position, and I felt like that was even another level of, okay, we still need to refine our process, and still need to be as efficient as possible. And that was really great because I felt like she gave us some good insight, she gave us some good structure, and we became a little more, I would say our process was nailed down more. versus being a little more loose with things.
And can you share like what were some of the big takeaways from that experience of, streamlining your processes and systems?
I would say the takeaway was that my fear was I think the takeaway was really delegating roles to each person versus uh, trying to do too much myself or trying to have one role do a little bit of everything was really just trying to keep everyone the expectation for this role does these things, and that sounds very straightforward and a no-brainer, but in design it can be so nonlinear, and I feel like there is so much fluidity with what we do that I felt that it was okay operating in that way, but I think that what it taught me was that there should be a process for everything and a template for everything, and there was just much more rigidity to what I was doing, which I was opposed to at the prior, but I thought, no, this is actually providing everyone with a more clear path forward and a more clear role identification. So I think was that was a big benefit.
And I'm curious for you, the question that kind of comes to mind is, how are you with those kind of boundaries? I think for lots of us as creatives, we, particularly when you start the business yourself and you're doing everything yourself, there comes this point where you've got to let go and you've got to delegate, like you say. And sometimes that can be challenging to sort of, like give that responsibility to other people and delegate it out. Did you find that easy or was that yeah, I'm just curious about your experience with it.
I th- I think now it's easy. It was not easy at first. It took several years for me to just be comfortable with, and I think that's comfortable with delegating, but it's also a matter of your familiarity with the people that you employ, right? So I think um, I generally have people stay with me for several years, many years. So with that familiarity comes trust and comes like, wow, you really can handle this and you can do this on your own and you have great ideas. And I just, I've had some really wonderful people that work with me and for me. So I think that's allowed me to delegate. But at first it was hard because I would say for more than 5 years, I was really trying to do everything. And, there was still a lot of background work that they were doing, but even just answering every email and every communication with the client, for instance, it was always me. But now I really am comfortable with my team doing that because not only do I have the experience of working with them for many years, but it also frees me up to do the more important things that I should be doing. Design is important to me, but my designer is also very talented, and so it's very much a collaboration, and it's not 100% me doing all the design work and sourcing. So I think that's been really wonderful to have trust in my team, realize that they're capable of so much, and that only comes with time and experience and just the benefit of me understanding the benefits of letting go.
And what about with, speaking for a friend, uh, sort of, do you have any elements of traces of like perfectionism or, because I mean, like, let's just talk about, say, you're sourcing something, I mean, this is maybe more early days, whatever, or you're trying to find inspiration or ideas or trying to source a sofa. And it's like, how long do you do this thing? How long do how much time do you dedicate to it? Because I think particularly with something that's very visual, I mean, it's infinite. The possibilities for a design scheme or a space. Like, how have you learnt to set boundaries in relation to, okay, I'm going to give it this amount of time to do
Mhm.
this particular task, and that is good enough. And um, is that something that you've ever had to work through, or is that come naturally to you?
Absolutely. I think that was my Achilles heel in the beginning, because I was doing all the sourcing. And so I would just be up at all hours because it was just like, oh, I keep finding things that are better than the last. And so I think for me, I have the luxury of having my designers really do the bulk of the sourcing, and then I'm more the editor. So that helps because I know that they've done a lot of research, and then I'm able to come in and say, "Oh, that's amazing. I love that. Oh, let's keep looking for, that chair, a chair to, go in that corner." But I think that it knowing that I'm not the only one doing the sourcing and I'm more really trying to refine and edit and curate, that has helped me immensely because I feel like there's not this infinite world out there. I mean, I could go on that path and I could keep looking, but I think that they have great taste and they know, you know, if there's something that's better out there, we'll find it right away. I would say also presentations, we are on a schedule with presentations, so sometimes it's a matter of, okay, we need to just stop looking because we are running out of time. And we
I do
try
love
and
a
schedule.
deadline.
Yeah,
Yeah.
deadline is the ultimate. And oftentimes, sometime occasionally clients have asked, "Oh, can you send us the presentation ahead of time just so we can let it sink in?" But we never do that because we're often working right up until because there's always some great ideas that might pop into our head the day before. And so I think that just having the deadline does give us that stopping point. But you're right that the possibilities can go on and on.
Because you incorporate a lot of vintage into your spaces as well, which sometimes vintage can be, it's not like you can be guaranteed that you're going to see that exact same piece. You might have seen it 6 months ago and now it's gone, or, so it can be a bit more of a longer process to find those vintage pieces. How do you find that?
Well, what we do is anything that we present to a client that's vintage, we let them know that a decision now is necessary if they like that piece. If they're, so about it, we'll say, that's fine. We can come back to it later, but it might be gone. But what we do is we present the we go through a house room by room when we do furnishings. And so it allows us to actually present the whole room as a whole. And if half of the pieces in that room are vintage, at the end of that meeting, oftentimes we have an answer and they'll say, "Yep, that's approved." And then we'll go and purchase it within a day or two. We have good relationships with our vendors. So with our vintage dealers, we often we can put a hold on something because sometimes, let's say we find it on a Monday, we present on a Friday, that following week, we're ordering that piece. It doesn't, vintage is hard if you find it well before you're ready to present it to the client. But the beauty of designing room by room versus whole home all at once is that we do get to find pieces that might have a very short shelf life in terms of availability, and we get to get an answer on it pretty quickly.
And what do your processes look like in terms of what are the programs that you use in your business? What about for client communication? Can you share some insights into that? Because I think people always love to know, like, what program are you using?
We use Studio Designer as our main program, not drawing, but all of our procurement goes through Studio Designer, and it's a really great library for everything we've purchased for any client. So we do our invoicing through that as well. We use AutoCAD for drafting. Occasionally we use SketchUp, but I would say Studio Designer is our bread and butter. I mean, that's where most things happen other than drawing. And it's worked really well for us.
And do you do lots of renders for clients? Is that part of the package that you offer or what they want to see?
We're
Do they want
starting
to
to
see more of that?
Yeah, we are starting to do more renderings. I would say it's not been I think they're very helpful, but as you know, they are time consuming. So we do them when we feel like the clients would really benefit from that. So if a client's really having trouble visualizing everything together, then we'll provide a rendering. Some clients just have an easier time seeing imagery of everything on one page and saying, "Oh, I can see that all together." But I would say it really depends on the client and what they need to really be able to sign off on a room or sign off on a space.
And I guess ultimately they're paying for that as well, aren't they? I mean, if it takes you a lot of time, then they need to feel like it's a benefit for them. I mean, if they get the concept from what you show otherwise, then it's not, I guess, always necessary.
Exactly. And so we leave that up to them, if they want the rendering, then, it's just additional hours, but it's something that I do think can be very helpful if they're done well. I think sometimes renderings, if for instance, we were on a project where the architect provided some renderings, but they weren't entirely reflective of the finishes. It was more the structure and the boxes and the casework. And in that sense, sometimes clients can be, they can almost decide that that's not what they want, but it's the finishes can be. So I think what I'm trying to say is it's important to have the rendering be as accurate as possible and attractive as possible, or else it can backfire.
Yeah. And what about your sort of average week, day? I know, I'm sure they all vary, to a great degree depending on where you are on a project, but can you provide an insight into what that looks like? What kind of hours are you working? Are you kind of doing 9 to 5? With that, is everyone in your team full time? And yeah, give us a little bit of an insight into your kind of like typical day or week.
Sure. We all work full time. We're very good about not working too early or too late. I let everybody, go home at 5 exactly. And, I'm fairly flexible with time and just understanding if somebody needs to come in late because of, childcare or a doctor's appointment, things like that. So we're all full time, but we're not in the office every day. Since COVID, we've done a hybrid of remote and in the office. So we all come to the studio twice a week. That's Monday and Wednesday. And then the other days of the week are usually filled with site visits, client meetings, presentations. And by presentations, I mean either we're going to the home and bringing materials and presenting to the client, or they're coming to our studio. So I would say it's a mix. It's a mix of desk work and design work, and then client facing, whether it's at a job site or in our studio presenting materials and designs. And you know, Fridays we try not to schedule meetings, but sometimes there are, just to have that. I feel like that's almost my catch up day of like, okay, what emails did I not respond to and what can I catch up on? And I try not to schedule meetings on Mondays, client meetings Mondays. Mondays are really our internal day to sync up and the whole team, and I do design reviews, and that's our day to really kind of get organized for the week.
And I'm curious, before we get onto the final questions, what advice would you give? I'm going to ask you to answer this question for two different phases. What advice would you give to somebody who is wanting to start as an interior designer? And what have you found to be work the best? And then I'm going to ask you to answer that question for somebody who has maybe like they've got, a few clients under their belt, but how can they then grow that business? What have you found has really helped you in your business?
I would say for the person just starting out, try and just get as much experience as you can, real world experience. So I thought working for somebody was more helpful than classes, but I'm not saying classes aren't helpful. They definitely can be, but I do think these days you don't need a degree to do what we do, but what you need is real world experience, and you really need to shadow somebody or apprentice or be a design assistant or intern. I would try and get that from not just one firm, but even more than one if you can. If let's say there's a summer internship and then a fall one, try and do two, because every firm does things differently. And it's great to see different processes and different methods. And I would say just try to be open minded about what it takes to survive in this industry. I feel like when I started, it was a little less, I think, competitive, or maybe I don't know what it feels like now. There's a lot of people doing this work, but not everybody has the same experience. And so I think what social media has done and what Pinterest has done and what YouTube has done is given a lot of people experience where they feel like they can go recreate that room, but what they don't have is the tactical technical experience. So I would say that's what you should focus on because that'll set you apart from everyone else that might have a great eye and might know how to put a room together from a material standpoint, but you need to know scale, you need to know transitions, you need to know how, you know, millwork and stone and tile all interact with each other. And so I think that's the part that I would say focus on the things that will give you that technical experience because I think the rest you can gain a little easier from just osmosis, in the world.
That's a great answer. And what about somebody who is more that they've maybe got their business running for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, you know, got clients under their belt, but really are in that growth phase of wanting to grow the business and kind of feel like, okay, I really want to make this work. Like what have been some of the things that have really helped on your journey in relation to that? What would you suggest to them?
I think a couple things. I think networking, surrounding yourself with the people that you want to work with. So, networking is huge. Going to design events, talking to architects, talking to builders, talking to people that are even peers, talking to people around you that might go to coffee with and refer you to jobs. So I think job referrals are really, really important. I think also the other thing would be only showing your best work. And that's hard when you first start out because you don't have a plethora of images. But don't I wouldn't put imagery out there for work that you don't feel super proud of or that you don't think is very strong because that is someone else will see that and they'll think, "Oh, well, I don't really love that. And that doesn't feel high quality." And then they might go somewhere else. So I would say even if you just have one project versus four not, medium caliber projects, but one great project, only show that one. And all people need to see is one project that you've done or several rooms that give off the feel that you want to what you want to be designing. And that's where I think you'll set yourself apart too, where you don't really need to show everything you've done, just the strong work.
Yeah, no, definitely. Okay, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. So let's go on to the final 10, the quick 10, kind of quick. um, so, first of all, depends on, some people, everyone's got a different approach to answering these questions, which I love. All right, the first one is which 5 words best describe you?
I think, well, at least I'm going to answer this based on what people have told me. But I think this is true. I would say laid back, optimistic, hardworking, big-hearted, and a little goofy.
I love that.
I just sense of humor is important to me, whether, with my team or with clients. I think it's important to not take yourself too seriously. So that's where that
Yeah.
came from.
What's one of the best lessons that you've learned on your journey?
To surround yourself with talented, driven, good-hearted people and to, try and walk away from people that don't live up to that and don't lift you and support you. So I think that works for both on the client side and on the staff side, building your team.
Yeah, I noticed actually when I was looking at your portfolio and your work that one of your more recent projects you've worked with Kendra and Seth Smoot, who I mean I love both of their work, and I think that's an example of it as well, isn't it? Like the photographers that you work with, the stylists that you work with, all of those things are like you lift each other up, don't you?
Exactly. And I feel so lucky because I think I am in a community where there are lots of talented people, but I don't think it's purely by chance. I think it's because we seek these people out that inspire us, and we seek people out that we want to work with and collaborate with, and I think that's a big lesson I've learned.
What's your proudest achievement?
This was hard to answer. I think it's not one single moment. I think it's just really stepping back high level and looking at the team that I've built and the brand and thinking about all the memories along the way. And I know that might sound cheesy, but I think that I'm just proud of where we've come and I'm proud of all the when I look at the projects we've done, I don't think there was one single moment where it was the peak of the mountain. I think it's been this really beautiful gradual appreciation for I don't know, everything we've done and the clients that we've met along the way and the relationships we've built. So that's my answer there.
I mean, it sounds like the key to a, a successful, long-lasting business. You know, sometimes I think some people can have huge spikes and then they're not necessarily prepared for it. So to have this kind of beautiful, gradual growth sounds like a good place to be.
Yeah, I think you explained it perfectly. I think there has been, there's been proud moments of, oh, we've got this, getting a project in the Bahamas was really wonderful. And there's certain moments, but I think that it's really like being able to wake up and think, I feel lucky to be going to work and working with these people and collaborating with these architects. And I think it's true. It didn't happen overnight. And um, I've been in this business over 15 years. So there's this sense of just groundedness with knowing that it's been a steady ride and it's been wonderful.
What's been one of your best decisions?
To quit my job and work for nothing and move to Los Angeles to work for a designer. And basically the decision to go into interior design was my parents thought I was crazy, but it was the best decision I made. They thought that I was, being risky and worried about me because they weren't, obviously they weren't supporting me at the time. But I think that fork in the road was very pivotal for me.
Who inspires you?
Lots of different people, but if we're going to keep to the design world, I would say I really love the Nikki Kehoe brand firm, everything they do. I think Nikki and Todd just create such layered, warm, inviting spaces. So I think I often look to them when I need some inspiration. I think Ilse Crawford is amazing and wonderful, and I just love her design philosophy, just that humanistic approach to design. So she's been a big one for me as well.
What are you passionate about?
Lots of things. Design for sure. I think food. I'm I just love food. I love cooking. I love eating. I have a little garden. I my kids are big into all sorts of food, so I think that's something, and it kind of ties into my dream that I want to
Okay.
fulfill.
Okay. Well, we're going
Um,
to ask you that now.
well, it sort of ties in. I would say my biggest dream is to take a year off and travel around the world. I've traveled to several countries, but there's many, many more I haven't touched. Um, and part of that is just taking a food tour around the world. We eat quite well here in California, but going to Southeast Asia and going to just Scandinavia, going to all sorts of places and immersing myself in the culture and the food, I think that would be incredible. I think the challenge is with this industry, no projects are all done at the same time with a year break in between. So one day.
So, so yeah, I mean, do you think is that something that you sort of think that's I mean, for one of a better word, like when you retire, or would you consider working remotely, sort of working on projects as you went, or it's just like a kind of a big dream in the sky and you haven't even thought it through at this stage?
I think it's a big dream. I think it might be when my kids are old enough to be in college, and then I might just take a retire slash remote work situation and do that. And maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's not a year, but I do think travel is such an amazing way to just open mind. It just opens your mind, and everyone knows it. It's inspiring. It gives you perspective. It can change the course of your life. So I think that it's something that I definitely want to take more time. I traveled much more in my 20s than I do now. Once you get older and have children and roots, it's harder. But I do think that's something that my husband is very interested in as well. And, he wasn't born here in this country either. So I think he's big on that. So maybe living in another country for a while too. Maybe not just traveling, but living.
What kind of age group are your children?
8 and 11. So
Okay, I've
my
got an 8 and 11-year-old as well as a
oh,
16 and a 13-year-old.
oh, wow. You've got 4.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, how you must be so busy.
They look after themselves a lot. So that's the good thing about having more children. Everything's got pros and cons. So one of the pros is that they do spend a lot of time together. They kind of look yeah, they're very independent, which is helps. Maybe we
That's
fostered
great.
that, I don't know.
I know, the older they
Uh,
get, the more they really can be so self-sufficient. We're learning that too. Even my 11-year-old now watches my 8-year-old, and it's great.
yeah. Wait till you got someone who's 16. I mean, he's learning to drive, so that's like a whole other thing. Anyway. um What are you reading? What's on your either your bedside table or even on your coffee table? What are some of your favorite coffee table books? What are you reading?
I admit I just don't make time to read books, at least novels. I have lots of coffee table books that, when the time comes, I do flip them. Um, but reading's always been something that I I get through one page and my head's on the pillow and I'm sleeping. So I'm notorious for not getting through a chapter a day or even a week or a month.
What about on your coffee table? Are there any that you're loving at the moment?
Oh, yeah, I was just reading the Duval kitchen book, which is so beautiful. I just bought a bunch of their books and or just a bunch of coffee table books. The Duval kitchen book is beautiful. I really love Jeremiah Brent's new book. I think it's so touching, and it's really more about emotions and feeling than it is about pretty pictures. So I that's been actually my the favorite book that I've bought in the last few months is Jeremiah book. Yeah, Jeremiah Brent's
Great.
book.
What about do you listen to podcasts? Yeah, what do you listen to or music? What do you listen to?
Yes, I do listen to some podcasts. I feel like I've just gotten into them more on my commute if I drive to job sites. I do listen to the Interior Collective if I want to, learn about design more. I listen to Smartless a lot because it's funny and I just love laughing and having a little joke on the way to meetings. And those I would say are the two that I listen to the most. And the Daily if I want to catch up on the news.
And finally, what piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
To my youngest self, I would say, and this is my school age self, trust that you will find your path and that it may change over time. I think I worried so much when I was in grade school, especially high school and college, of what to do with my life. It was just this looming question of what should I do? What job should I have? What career should I take? And I definitely spun myself into, a tizzy about it only to find what I wanted to do in my mid-20s, which was much later. So I felt like there was a lot of worry until that moment. So I think for younger people, it's that you don't have to worry so much. It will find you or you'll find it, but give it time and be open.
Love that. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation, learning more about your journey. Thank you for being so open and honest about all the back end of your business, because I know that so many people, they love getting those kind of insights into, a little bit behind the beautiful pictures and seeing how has this happened? This doesn't just magically happen overnight, and to learn about your journey. So thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here today.
I so appreciated being here, and I hope it is helpful to your listeners and loved speaking with you.
Great. Thank you. All of the links and info for this episode are at nataliewalton.com/podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so that you can get a direct download of the latest episode. And I really appreciate when you take a minute to rate and review, as well as share the love with someone you know who might benefit from this episode, or on social media. If you'd like to access a range of free resources, come visit my website, nataliewalton.com. Thank you to Jaeger Media for producing this podcast. And I would also like to acknowledge the people of the Bundjalung Nation where it was recorded, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I look forward to connecting again soon. I'm Natalie Walton, and you've been listening to Imprint.